There are people whose lives feel like fate is playing a cruel joke on them. Born into hardship, raised in poverty, they grow up battered by setbacks, bruised by failures, and scarred by life itself. And yet, it is those very people, with a will forged in fire and a heart that refuses to give in, who write stories the world cannot ignore. This isn't a fairy tale. It's not a miracle either. It's the gritty, uphill journey of a boy who lost his father, dropped out of school in 6th grade, failed at nearly everything he tried, was rejected over 1,000 times. And yet, he began the greatest chapter of his life after the age of 65. While most people chose to rest, he chose to rise. And with nothing more than a humble fried chicken recipe, he built a global empire. This is the story of Colonel Sanders, a living symbol of the truth. It's never too late to start again. If you're feeling tired, if life feels like it's slammed every door shut, then stay, because this story might just reignite a fire you thought you'd lost. On an autumn day in 1895, in the quiet and humble town of Henryville, Indiana, a rural corner of America slowly stepping into a new century, a baby boy let out his first cry. No one knew then that this frail little child, with skinny hands and bright, searching eyes, would one day become a global icon, the founder of one of the most famous restaurant chains the world has ever known. But in that moment, he was simply a boy born in a hardship. His childhood didn't come with carefree days or the laughter of play like other children his age. At just 6 years old, tragedy struck. His father, the family's only breadwinner, passed away unexpectedly. His young mother was left behind with 3 small children and no support. Along with their father's love, the family also lost what little stability they had. Desperate to survive, his mother took a job at a tomato canning factory, working from dawn until long after sunset. The house grew quiet, too quiet, and in that silence, a 6-year-old boy had to step into the role of a father. He cooked, cleaned, and cared for his siblings before he even fully knew the alphabet. Those days didn't just teach him how to survive. They lit a slow-burning fire within him. A fire called responsibility. A fire called resilience. He learned to make simple meals with all the love his small hands could offer. He learned to bear hunger without complaint, to hold back tears when his mother came home late and exhausted. Life was far from easy, but in that struggle, a stubborn seed of perseverance began to take root. By the age of 10, while other children were still in school, playing under the sun, he was working in nearby farms, trading sweat for a few coins, trading childhood for meals to feed his family. There were no words of encouragement, no helping hands to guide him. And yet, he kept walking, with small feet and a heart that refused to be afraid of life. Life had tested him early, but instead of breaking, he learned to bend. No one taught him how to overcome hardship. Hardship itself became his greatest teacher, and this was only the first chapter in a long and stormy journey, where a boy the world might have overlooked would one day do something extraordinary. Life didn't give him time to grow up. While other kids his age were still in classrooms, sounding out syllables and learning how to spell, he was waking up before dawn, trekking across waterlogged fields, walking for hours to reach nearby farms. There, his small hands were expected to do a grown man's work. He herded cattle, cut grass, shoveled dirt, plowed land, anything to earn a few coins and maybe a leftover meal. But he never complained, because in his eyes, there was no room for weakness. Poverty didn't kill his dreams, but it slowly wore away the innocence of childhood. By 6th grade, after missing school again and again, unable to keep up, he quietly dropped out. No graduation, no farewell, just another morning like any other, when he left the classroom and never returned. For some, that would have marked the end of a dream. But for him, it was the beginning of a new journey, the journey of survival. He left his hometown and began living wherever he could, sleeping in barns, grain sheds, horse stalls, anywhere with a roof. Sometimes he swept floors in warehouses. Other times, he worked as a helper for carriage painters. He never turned down a job, as long as it meant he could stay alive and send a little money home to his mother. Life taught him lessons no textbook ever could. It taught him how to tell the genuine from the deceitful, how to be kind but never soft, and most of all, how to fail without losing faith in himself. At just 16, he did something bold, something most wouldn't dare. He lied about his age to enlist in the U.S. Army. To him, the battlefield felt less cruel than the hunger gnawing at him every night. He craved a title, a purpose. He wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with real men. He only served for 1 year, but he carried with him a deep pride that he had done what seemed impossible. Still, even in uniform, the world didn't lay down a red carpet for his return. No diploma, no powerful connections, no easy opportunities. Just a young man with calloused hands and a heart that had never learned to surrender. And that's how an ordinary boy began to carve his name into an extraordinary story. Sometimes life doesn't knock you down with one big blow. It chips away at you, little by little, with 100 tiny stumbles that have no name. Each one silently wears down your confidence, eats away at your will, until all you want to do is give up. And for that young man, those stumbles came in waves, stretching across decades of his life. After leaving the army, he took up work as a laborer on the railroads. Back-breaking, sun-scorched, rain-soaked work, trading sweat for every meager paycheck. But he didn't complain, because deep inside, there was still a flicker of something powerful. The hunger to learn, the drive to rise on his own 2 feet. He spent every spare hour studying law at a small college near his job site. It felt like the door to a better future had finally cracked open. But one heated argument, one fistfight with a classmate, and the entire dream collapsed. No degree, no law career, just regret. He moved back in with his mother, starting from zero again. This time, he tried his hand at selling life insurance. He gave it everything: effort, persistence, passion. And still, he was fired for not following the company's script. Still, he didn't quit. He launched a ferry boat company, helping passengers cross the river. And this time it worked. Money started coming in. His name gained recognition. But before he could celebrate, he poured all his earnings into a new venture, manufacturing gas lamps, only to discover electric lighting had already taken over the market. He lost everything. Again, he found work at a tire company, and things finally seemed stable. But then the factory shut down, another victim of the economic crisis. And just like that, he was unemployed once more. By the time he turned 40, most people his age had a family, a career, a warm home to return to each night. But him, all he had was a long list of failures, a pair of hardened hands, and one haunting question: am I ever going to be good at anything? Then one day, when life seemed like nothing but dead ends, a small opportunity came his way to manage a roadside gas station. It wasn't much, but to him, it was a sliver of light after far too long in the dark. And almost no one knew that in that tiny gas station, a culinary legend was about to be born. Some beginnings looked nothing like success. Just an old, dusty gas station on the side of the road. Quiet, humble, with a few trucks stopping by each day for gas, water, or directions. But for a man who had tasted more than his share of failure, this was the most precious opportunity of his life. A chance to start over, to stand on his own 2 feet one more time. It was 1930. America was knee-deep in the Great Depression, and every family was struggling to put food on the table. Shell Oil allowed him to run the gas station rent-free, in exchange for a share of the profits. A tough deal, but nothing scared him more than the hunger he'd already survived. Yet what made this story different wasn't how he sold gasoline. It was what he cooked in a little kitchen out back. He started making simple meals: mashed potatoes, cornbread, stewed vegetables, and most importantly, a pan-fried chicken recipe he'd learned in his childhood, back when he had to cook for his siblings after their father died. At first, it was just a gesture of kindness, warm food for weary travelers. But something unexpected happened. People started coming back, not for gas, but for his chicken. That flavor, crispy, golden, deeply seasoned, rich with comfort, spoke to the hearts of working folks who'd gone too long without a proper meal. Word spread, and soon, more and more people came. drawn not by the gas pumps, but by the humble man with silver hair and a kind smile, and his unforgettable chicken. Beneath that old gas station sign, a nameless little diner quietly began to take shape. The kitchen grew. He added tables, pulled up chairs, used the tiny house next door as a dining room. And within just a few years, his homemade fried chicken had become a local treasure. No one called him a professional chef. He had no culinary degree, no official recipe, just the instinct of a man who once cooked to survive, and the heart of someone who knew what it meant to need a good meal. He never set out to chase fame. All he wanted was to keep a small kitchen running, to feed himself and anyone else who needed a bite of comfort. But it was that very humility, combined with a recipe that touched the soul, that quietly laid the first brick in what would one day become a global empire. And it was right there, in a roadside gas station, that the legend of Kentucky Fried Chicken began to rise. But then, as if fate couldn't bear to let a resilient soul rest, disaster struck again, just when things were finally coming together, when the little roadside restaurant had become a cherished stop for the entire town. A fire broke out one night in the kitchen, swift and merciless. The flames devoured everything he had built. The diner, the small motel next door he had just bought with nearly all his savings. Gone in hours. Ashes, char beams, ruins of dreams once again reduced to dust. But he didn't cry, didn't raise his fist to the sky, didn't give up. The very next morning, while the smoke still lingered in the air, he began to clean. No waiting for help, no waiting for luck, because he knew if life had extinguished his flame time and again, then he would be the one to relight it, even if it meant striking a single match in the dark. Less than a year later, the restaurant was rebuilt. Bigger, better, with 140 seats. Customers returned, loyal as ever. He was back behind the counter, serving up crispy fried chicken with that same gentle smile. Some said, he's not just selling food, he's serving hope. But life wasn't done testing him. World War II broke out. Traffic thinned. People went off to war. The economy crumbled. The restaurant, just reborn, was forced to close again. He wasn't young anymore. So many dreams had burned. So many restarts. Most people his age would have given up, settled for what little was left. But not him. He packed a small bag. Inside, a handwritten recipe. His own fried chicken blend, crafted over years, with more than a dozen hand-mixed herbs and spices. He knocked on restaurant doors, one by one, asking to cook a sample. If you like it, he'd say, let me license the recipe to you. 1 time, 10 times, 100, 1,009 rejections. But he didn't stop, because for him, every no wasn't the end. It was one step closer to the yes that mattered. This was a man who had walked through war, through fire, through hunger, through loss, and still stood tall, fueled by an unshakable belief that one day, the world would know the taste of his chicken. Most people, when they turn 65, start thinking about slowing down, gardening, sipping tea, playing with grandkids. But for him, 65 was not an end. It was the beginning of something no one believed possible. No retirement fund, no safety net, just a worn-out car, a few sets of clothes, and a handwritten fried chicken recipe. He hit the road, across state lines, across America. No ads, no fame, no investors, just the most valuable thing he owned. A belief in the recipe he had crafted by hand, and a love for cooking born from a lifetime of hardship. He'd walk into small diners, humble restaurants, mom-and-pop shops, ask if he could cook a sample, let customers taste it. If they liked it, he'd offer to license the recipe for just 4 cents per chicken sold. Some laughed in his face. Others dismissed him without even trying the food. A few gave him a free meal, then sent him on his way. But then there were the ones, the rare few, who took a bite, paused, and realized there was something special in that chicken, not just in the blend of spices, but in the soul of the man who made it. In 1952, he signed his first franchise deal. Then another, and another. A small network began to form, not built on money, but on persistence, humility, and heart. By 1959, he opened his own restaurant and established headquarters for the brand the world would soon know. Kentucky Fried Chicken. He was already in his 70s, but he still drove thousands of miles, slept in the back of his car, knocked on doors, fried batches of chicken himself, and signed deals with his whole heart. He didn't grow a business with ambition alone. He grew it with a story. His story, one of resilience, rejection, and relentless belief. And soon, KFC was everywhere. From the corners of America to Canada, the UK, Mexico, Jamaica, one of the very first fast food chains to go global. But what made people respect him wasn't just the crispy chicken. It was the man behind it. The white suit, the snow-white beard, that soft, toothy smile. A man who didn't give up when life burned him down, who started from scratch at an age most give up on dreams. And so, while the world counted down to retirement, he was counting up the days, spreading the flavor of his heart from that tiny town where it all began to the entire world. At the age of 90, the world said goodbye to a legend. The man in the white suit, with silver hair, gentle eyes, and a slow, thoughtful voice. He had become more than just the face of fried chicken. He had become the symbol of an entire generation who refused to surrender to fate. When he passed, KFC had already reached over 6,000 locations across 48 countries. And just a few decades later, that number soared beyond 22,000 worldwide, an unimaginable milestone for any brand. But what he left behind wasn't just a food empire. It was a spirit, a legacy, a story retold by millions, like a spark that reignites strength whenever life gets too heavy to bear. A boy who lost his father at 6, who dropped out of school in the 6th grade, who was fired from jobs, failed in businesses, worked countless manual labor gigs, and faced over 1,000 rejections. A man who lost his restaurant to fire, lost his customers to war, lived off a $105 Social Security check, and then rose above it all to create one of the most iconic global brands of all time. His name was Harlan David Sanders, but the world knows him as Colonel Sanders. He wasn't the best chef, didn't attend any fancy university, had no hidden business secrets, but he had one thing no one could replicate: unshakable perseverance and the unrelenting belief that it's never too late to begin. Sometimes, all we need is one reason to keep going, and he was that reason. In a world where we give up after a few setbacks, where one rejection can break us, where we lose ourselves at the first sign of struggle, his story is a reminder. Success has no age. Dreams have no expiration date. And as long as you're still moving, you still have a chance. So remember Colonel Sanders, not just when you take a bite of crispy fried chicken, but when life feels like it's turning its back on you. Because if a 65-year-old man can start from nothing, build from the trunk of a car, and reach the entire world, then nothing can stop you, except you. And so it goes. The life of Colonel Sanders was never a straight road paved with glory. It was a spiral of trials, marked by scars of failure and countless moments of rising from the ashes. He didn't start with any special advantage. No money, no formal education, no safety net. But he had something the world will always respect: a heart that wouldn't give up, and a spirit that refused to lose. Maybe the greatest thing he left behind wasn't just a famous fried chicken recipe, but a recipe for life. You're never too old to dream, never too late to begin, and no failure is big enough to extinguish someone who's truly determined. So if today you feel tired, lost, or wondering whether your dream is just too far away, remember him, a man who started over at 65 and built a global legend, with nothing but worn hands and a heart that never stopped burning. You still have time. You still have a chance. Just don't let go. Thank you for listening to this story. Keep living, keep dreaming, and never, ever give up on yourself. BraveSpark channel, where stories light the fire in your soul.